We'd never really worked, well, they'd never really worked with us. You know, we tried writing stuff. We were doing loads of gigs at the time, and, you know, the odd day spent in a windy church hall trying to write songs together just wasn't working, so we had to take time off. So we pulled out of gigs for the entire summer of 71. I seem to recall it was 3 months, which was unheard of in those days for them, you know, working band. But it was great because suddenly it was a chance to work with a band, you know, to a professional standard. I'd never really made an album like that. I'd done an album once before with a band called Quiet World, but that was very much sort of don't give up your day job, you know. And it was great working with everybody. We just bought a new Mellotron. And it was just fantastic, you know. I had a new Les Paul that I got courtesy of the band, a high watt stack. Lovely, you know. Felt very, very nice. And I practically never spent a night away from home. So suddenly I'm 3 months with these guys who are all talking the same sort of language, a kind of... it was almost as if the band had their own kind of way of communicating. I guess, you know, the fact they've been at school for all those years, I mean, it was a little bit hard when I first joined. I didn't really understand what they were talking about. They had... it was almost like the equivalent of Cockney rhyming slang. And Mike, for instance, and Tony, chord shapes on guitars, they would say, oh, that's a nice guy. That's nice. And I'd never heard that expression. They had their own world of Genesis even then.
It wasn't an easy writing session. I don't remember it being like that. But then, fair enough, you know, you got new people for the first time. But looking back, it's got a strong character.
I was much more of a player, you know, and you know, you give me a bit of music and I'll play it, kind of thing. I wasn't really writing, apart from a few lines of Harold the Barrel, probably with Pete, and for Absent Friends. I mean, you know, it's just difficult, you know, because it's one of these things where you never know what helped the bit. We were playing an awful lot together to write, a lot of jamming, as we've continued to do throughout the years, but I wasn't actually a bona fide writer.
I think it started with Ant, actually. Ant and I think. I'm sure it did, playing 12-string stuff together. And I had this Rickenbacker guitar. I tuned the strings. I started doing weird tunings. And this is a very bizarre tuning with it. All the top 3 strings tuned to F sharp, which is just mad. But it made that jangly sound. And it made that big chord later on when you go bum bum. Had this lovely open stringed feeling. And in fact, it's interesting because in a sense, we were trying to work as a 4-piece and it wasn't really working. Tony doing all the lead parts on fuzz piano, you know. But actually, funny enough, this song was the first time I felt that it actually did work as a 4-piece. The sound we made, I'm playing pedals at the end and Tony's playing keyboards. And it's funny, this song, I think, I mean, had we gone the 4-piece route, this song might have been where we might have gone. No, it didn't. But in a sense, this song worked well on stage as a 4-piece.
Play me my song.
The first thing I noticed was that no one was actually making the sound of a musical box, and I thought, God, you know, here's an opportunity for me. So I did this thing, recorded at half speed, which was a little guitar lick going. And so that was, you know, my chance to be the Sugar Plum Fairy, perhaps.
Mike started off with the first ding, 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 and you know, I was a big fan of The Who too, and I really wanted to try and persuade Mike to find something, you know, like a little Townsend arm-waving, you know, ballsy attacking section that we could add in there. And I think I was pushing very hard for that, and it was in the rooms in West Hampstead on the 28 bus route. And it was, I think, exciting when that sort of first came to gel as a piece. And I think my head at the time also was in this Victoriana world, which I pictured around the house my dad had grown up in, and so this sort of controlled English mental landscape under which festered, violence and sex was the sort of flavour that I was trying to bring in to the lyrics and vocals.
And I want, and I feel, and I know, and I touch.
I think it created that sort of fantasy, the lyric relating, to all this sort of the old Victorian kind of quality it has, and the album cover, which related obviously to that as well. It was a very atmospheric piece. And it was musically interesting, and it went through all these changes and that stuff. It was a sort of precursor, perhaps, of what was to come later. You have the little bits, and not a lack of repetition in the song. You can start off with one bit, which is a very strong section, that opening part, but it never comes back again, And we used to quite like doing that. We used to just like using a bit once and then going to a very loud bit and then a very quiet bit and another loud bit and then a sort of serene bit. By using the contrasts, I think it's a sort of song that has about a lot of contrasts in it, which, again, is for some people is very appealing. And some people just find it irritating because it means it never settles into a groove, just sort of, you're doing one thing, this is great, it's stopped again, they're going off, time change and everything. But, so it is a very sort of typical Genesis song, sort of that. It followed on from Stagnation, I suppose, that same kind of thing, but perhaps a little bit more dramatic.
I never saw Family, the group Family, but there was a thing that they used to do called the Weaver, I think, which was a ding digga ding digga ding digga 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 ding, kind of a rolling thing, and I had a pretty good foot, so I could do ding digga ding, bum dida bum dida bum dida bum, and they kind of liked that, and so I put that with their rhythm, and suddenly it was like, hey, we're off,
You see, there we are. We're kind of going acoustic, but going more electric. It starts soft, and it builds and builds and builds. By the end, it's just everything's going. It's as big as any song we've ever done, really. I think. And I guess probably this must be the first time with the bass pedals. Because Trust was a 5-piece, so you didn't need bass pedals, whereas we'd gone to that 4-piece scenario, with Tony playing the lead parts and me trying to play rhythm guitar parts, and bass pedals at the same time. So in a sense, it's funny how things happen. You get stretched, and you're forced into doing something. I'm sure if we hadn't been a 4-piece, I'd never have bothered to pick up the bloody bass pedals.
Musical Box obviously was, as I said, developed out of us playing as a 4-piece, and I think it also developed out of really right from the early days of the playing with Ant and Mike. And so it had that sort of 2-guitar thing, and I play guitar on it as well at the front, so the first part of it is all guitar, and sort of a few ideas came out of that. But I think the real strength of the song comes towards the end, really. This little sort of bit that starts, She's a Lady, and then the organ comes in playing this little sort of fugue type thing, which I originally saw as instrumental, I have to say. I thought, this is really good, and then we did it, and then Pete suddenly, we were doing the vocals, and I said, he's finished now, and then suddenly he started singing on this bit, and I thought, shit, he's singing all over my bit. And I must admit, initially I wasn't too sure about doing that at all. And in fact, when we did the mix of the album, we mixed the voice too low. But on stage when we started playing this, I realised just how strong that was, Because it was like what I played was still there in a sense, but the vocal just gave it that real sort of capping quality, I think. And it was a real standout moment on stage, I think.
Well, this was one of the regular battlegrounds, because Tony would, blissfully unaware of an audience, want to stretch things out for 10 or 20 minutes for big keyboard and instrumental things. And I would be thinking, well, we're trying to tell a story here too. We need to re-plug in back with some vocals. So I think there were a lot of arguments about those type of issues, and probably more in latter days too, in sort of Supper's Ready and like Apocalypse and 9/8 and some of the Lamb, because I just felt some of the keyboard solos were just going to were too long and going to lose people. So, and it was an important part because, once you didn't want all the up moments to be instrumental only and all the down moments to be the vocal bits. I certainly didn't.
Sunday at 6 when they close.
first thing I ever sort of wrote in my own right for Genesis was for Absent Friends, and I think I was too shy to present it to the lead singer. I think, oh, Pete, do you fancy doing this? Because, Pete was very much the star, very open, friendly, approachable, etc. But at the same time, I think maybe the fact that we were the two new boys, Phil and I, we sort of wrote that thing together. We wrote the lyrics together. I came up with the music for it, and it was a pleasant little ditty. The thing is, a lot of people didn't realise that was Phil, because Phil and Pete did have very similar voices. In fact, I remember seeing them live before I joined the band, and I thought there was some sort of automatic double tracking effect going on with Pete's voice, and then as I looked a little closer, I could see that Pete and Phil were in perfect sync with similar sort of vocal tones.
Steve and I did write this song because we were the two new boys that kind of felt, well, why don't we sort of see what we can do? And the fact that it was on the album, I guess, was because it was very different from anything else, and I think we were quite happy to have that variety.
Any formation of the band has always been like anyone that could do something, could bring something to the table, singing, playing flute. We encourage it, you know what I mean? Whatever you've got, you use, I think Pete enjoyed having Phil singing.
It's not my favourite moment, I have to say, but his voice sounds very nice, very pure. He sort of has more of a sort of James Taylor sort of quality in those days, right, before he got this great big the rasp that was to come later. But it showed that he had it. I think because he had a nice voice, we thought it would be great to sort of feature it as a solo thing, and that was it. And Pete was quite happy with that, Just showed another side to the group, I think, a little bit, really. But as I said, it was more in the contributions, really, where he's singing, with Peter. I think that it's more of on Harold the Barrel, for example, where they sing the whole thing as a duet, sing it together. In fact, they're actually mixed on the tape. You can't separate them. We thought it might be nice to sort of, because it sounds sometimes it sounds a little Phil biased, I think, that song.
I'm standing in a doorway on the main square, kitchen is melting.
What happens is that my voice, as you can hear now, has got quite a lot of bass content in it, low content, and the lower Phil's, on the other hand, is much sort of higher element, his sort of center of gravity, if you like, harmonically. So if you put the two at exactly the same level, you'll read more of his voice than mine. And even though Harold the Barrel, was all my song, that I think, you do hear just as much of Phil, if not more, in some places. I think when I left and that voice continued, that was easier for people to get used to, and he's a very natural singer, so I think it should have occurred to the others earlier on than it did, I think, to try Phil.
Harold the Barrel was a good, fun song. It showed the kind of the humour that we would later, well, has always actually been in Genesis. People tend to take us very seriously, but we don't. So that was a good thing. Fountain of Salmacis was a huge stage song.
I had this piece that I'd written when I was at university, which is just this little organ part, really. It was quite a simple little rundown. And I started developing it once. We decided to buy a mellotron, that was it, because we really wanted, I loved the sound, and we had used a little bit on Trespass, and we loved the first Crimson album, which had used it obviously very extensively. So we went and bought one of the ones off King Crimson, actually. And I sort of, this little riff I'd started off at in university. I then tried it was using the mellotron and the organ, and it really developed these great big swells on this thing, and it sounded fantastic. And so that was Fountain of Salmacis, and we then developed from that sort of opening part into a complete song out of that, which was a lot of jamming from the rest of the group and everything. But it produced a very, I think, a sort of strongly romantic thing, a lyric, obviously, sort of based on the myth of Salmacis.